There are moments when nothing dramatic happens on the outside, yet something subtle begins to shift within, not loud enough to interrupt your day, but present enough to change how you experience it. You may not have been looking for this message, and that's important because it isn't meant to pull you away from what you're doing or demand your attention all at once. It arrives quietly, the way understanding often does, when the mind is no longer racing and the need to react has softened. Lately, you may have noticed that constant input feels heavier than it used to, that responding to everything feels unnecessary, and that some things no longer ask for your energy the way they once did. This isn't disinterest, and it isn't fatigue. It's a sign that awareness is becoming more selective. Not everything that reaches you needs to be processed immediately, and not every thought requires a response. This message doesn't interrupt your life. It meets you in a space that has already grown quieter on its own. Not empty, just less crowded. And in that quieter space, it becomes easier to notice what actually matters before it needs to be explained or justified. There's nothing you need to do with this right now, nothing to agree with, nothing to act on. Simply let it remain present for a moment. Some reflections aren't meant to be absorbed quickly. They unfold naturally as you move through your day. And this is one of those reflections. Over time, these subtle shifts often raise quiet questions, not because something is wrong, but because familiar patterns no longer fit the same way they once did. You may find yourself responding more slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of consideration, noticing that your reactions carry more weight when they are chosen rather than automatic. What once felt urgent may now feel optional, and what once demanded explanation may no longer seem worth the effort to clarify. This change can be confusing at first, especially if you were used to being engaged, available, and responsive. But there is a difference between disengaging and becoming more grounded. Grounding doesn't remove you from life. It changes how you stand within it. You begin to notice that your attention narrows naturally, not as a loss, but as a refinement, leaving less room for distraction and more room for clarity. Certain conversations start to feel repetitive, not because the people involved have changed, but because your perspective has. You're not moving away from others, you're moving closer to what feels internally consistent. This process doesn't announce itself, and it rarely comes with certainty right away. It unfolds gradually, through small moments of recognition, when something no longer resonates and something else quietly does. Nothing has been taken from you during this shift. Something has been simplified. As this internal clarity develops, it often becomes more noticeable in interactions with others, not through conflict, but through subtle differences in rhythm and expectation. You may sense moments where conversations no longer flow the way they used to, where familiar exchanges feel slightly out of sync, even though nothing specific has changed on the surface. People often relate to each other through patterns, shared habits, and predictable responses, and when one person begins to shift internally, those patterns can feel unsettled. This doesn't mean anyone is at fault. It simply reflects that not all connections evolve at the same pace. You may notice that you listen more than you speak, that you choose your words with greater care, or that you step back from certain discussions without feeling the need to explain why. These choices are not avoidance. They are signs of clearer boundaries, forming naturally. Boundaries are not walls, they are points of understanding, helping define where your attention is best placed and where it's no longer required. As a result, some interactions may naturally become less frequent, while others remain steady or deepen. This is not a loss. It's a process of alignment, where what remains feels more consistent and what fades does so without force. There's no need to correct or justify this change. Most shifts of this kind speak for themselves over time. As this adjustment continues, slowing down begins to feel less like a pause and more like a form of clarity taking shape. You may notice that you naturally wait before responding, that you observe more than you engage, and that silence feels less uncomfortable than it once did. This isn't a withdrawal from what matters. It's a shift toward choosing when and where your attention is most useful. When attention becomes more intentional, it also becomes more stable. You may find that situations which once triggered quick reactions now pass with less friction. Not because they no longer matter, but because you're seeing them from a steadier place. There is value in this steadiness. It allows thoughts to settle before decisions are made, and it creates space for understanding to form without pressure. This kind of restraint doesn't limit expression. It refines it. What remains is not emptiness, but focus. And focus brings a different quality to everything it touches. Over time, this approach changes how moments are experienced, making them feel clearer, more grounded, and less driven by impulse. Nothing here requires effort. It unfolds as awareness deepens and habits adjust naturally around it. As this moment comes to a close, it may feel less like an ending and more like a point of balance, a place where nothing needs to be resolved immediately and nothing needs to be rushed into shape. There is value in allowing things to remain undefined for a while, in letting understanding continue to settle without the pressure to label it or turn it into action. Not every phase needs to announce what comes next, and not every period of clarity requires immediate movement. Sometimes, simply recognizing where you are is enough. You are not falling behind by staying present, and you are not standing still by choosing awareness over urgency. This way of moving may feel unfamiliar in a world that rewards speed and constant output, but it offers something different, a steadiness that doesn't depend on external validation or constant progress. Over time, this steadiness reshapes how choices are made, allowing them to emerge naturally rather than being forced through expectation or pressure. What aligns will continue without effort, and what no longer fits will fade without conflict. There is no need to measure this moment against past versions of yourself or against timelines that no longer feel relevant. Growth doesn't always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like simplification, like learning to trust fewer signals and listening more closely to the ones that remain. This reflection doesn't ask anything from you. It doesn't suggest a next step, and it doesn't frame this moment as preparation for something else. It simply acknowledges the quiet clarity that is already present. For now, that is sufficient. And when movement does return, it will do so with a sense of ease rather than urgency, guided by consistency rather than impulse. Until then, remaining aware of where you stand is not a pause from progress. It is progress taking a different form. All that has been explored so far is not meant to lead you toward a fixed conclusion, but to help you recognize a state that is gradually taking shape. Clarity that comes from reacting less, dispersing less, and no longer moving in rhythms that no longer fit. When viewed as a whole, this reflection reveals that real change does not arrive through dramatic decisions or defining moments, but through subtle adjustments in how you show up each day, in how you choose when to speak and when to remain silent, and in allowing certain things to pass without the need to label, justify, or resolve them immediately. In everyday life, this awareness can be supported through simple, practical choices that remain grounded in reality, such as setting aside a consistent part of the day where no new input is added, observing a situation fully before responding rather than reacting on impulse, or paying attention to how your body feels when you agree to something or quietly step away from it. These small acts help you sense internal consistency, allowing actions to arise from understanding rather than pressure or habit. As that understanding settles, life does not need to slow down completely or change direction all at once. It simply begins to move with greater intention. This is not the end of a process, but the formation of a steadier foundation, one that allows whatever comes next to emerge with less force, greater coherence, and a deeper alignment with where you truly stand. Before we enter this moment of prayer, allow your heart to settle where it is, without striving, without expectation. Simply present before the Lord, ready to receive clarity that does not shout, but gently reveals itself. Lord God, Most High, we come before you not with urgency, but with openness, recognizing that you often work in the quiet places we overlook. You see the subtle shifts within us before we understand them ourselves. Teach us to honor the slowing of our reactions, the refining of our attention, and the growing desire for wisdom over noise. As your word reminds us, be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Grant us discernment to know when to speak and when to remain silent, when to move forward and when to wait without fear. Where our minds have been crowded, bring simplicity. Where our hearts have been pulled in many directions, bring alignment. Help us release the need to respond to everything and instead respond faithfully to what truly matters. Let our choices flow not from pressure or habit, but from the steadiness that comes from walking closely with you. Shape our days with clarity, our conversations with restraint, and our actions with intention, so that our lives may reflect your peace rather than the world's urgency. We trust that what aligns with your will remain, and what does not will gently fall away, without conflict or regret. Thank you for sharing this sacred moment. If this prayer resonated with you, take a moment to reflect and share what stirred in your heart in the comments below. Your words may encourage someone else who is listening quietly. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay connected with messages that bring clarity, grounding, and truth. Stay present, stay open, and remember, sometimes the deepest movement begins in stillness.